Aviation has come a long way since its beginnings with the Wright Brothers. Today, we're going to show you just how advanced planes have become by listing off the top 6 fastest planes. Number 6. XB-70 Valkyrie, Mach 3.02, 2,056 miles per hour. Although this plane was designed in the 1950s, there's nothing old school about what it can accomplish. The XB-70 was created to be a nuclear strike bomber that can be flown at Mach 3, and for those of you who don't know, Mach 3 is 3 times the speed of sound. Its speed made it incredibly difficult for enemies to combat it, thus rendering the XB-70 as the perfect offense in times of war. Fortunately, the XB-70 Valkyrie was never needed for its intended task. Because of this, the manufacturers only needed to make 2 of these planes. They were working on this but halted production. One of the 2 XB-70 planes first took flight in 1964 and was able to reach its limit of Mach 3 just a year later in 1965. The second model was destroyed after it suffered a mid-air collision during flight. So you may be wondering, just how is it possible to power a plane this powerful? Well, the XB-70 Valkyrie is powered by 6 General Electric YJ93's engines. Each engine has over 30,000 pounds of thrust each. That's a lot of power. It's well needed because the XB-70 Valkyrie can fly up to 73,000 feet for over 4,000 miles. Remember, this plane was designed to be able to reach enemy soil across the world during times of war. The XB-70 is definitely a plane that will no doubt go down in history as one of aviation's greatest achievements. Number 5. Bell X-2 Starbuster, Mach 3.2, 2,094 miles per hour. Developed in 1945, the Bell X-2 Starbuster was built by NACA, the National Advisory Committee for Aeronautics, and the United States Air Force. The purpose of the plane was to investigate structural effects of heating and stability with a plane that reached incredibly high altitude and speed. They began to test launch the Bell X-2 Starbusters a year later in 1946. The launches were held in Wallops Island, Virginia. These launches were held to make sure the Bell X-2 Starbuster could successfully perform its tasks, like the built-in pilot ejection system that the Air Force had designed. The escape function worked by the nose of the Bell X-2 Starbuster would come off and deploy a parachute that would bring the plane down to a lower altitude. Once that's complete, the pilot would then escape the plane through a canopy he'd have to manually open and jump out to safely. The Air Force loved this idea, but the folks at NACA weren't too happy. They thought this method of emergency escape was too dangerous and could potentially risk the pilot's life. And it turns out they were right. On September 27, 1956, Captain Milburn G. Apt piloted the Bell X-2 Starbuster. During the flight, Milburn lost control of the plane and began spinning out. He then proceeded to activate the emergency ejection system. He was unsuccessful. The pilot couldn't manage to escape the high-speed plane, and it crashed into the ground with him still inside. The death of Apt may be the reason you haven't heard of the Bell X-2 Starbuster before, as Apt losing his life due to the plane's evacuation system failing is seen as a major setback for all involved. Number 4. Mig25 Foxbat, Mach 3.2, 2,190 miles per hour. Tensions were high during the Cold War. That's why the Soviet Union came together to build one of the most impressive aircrafts to date, the Mig25 Foxbat. The Foxbat was built as an offensive military vehicle for the Soviet Union and as a threat to the West. However, due to their ability to fly at high altitudes and their speed, the Foxbat planes were used far after the Cold War. In fact, they were brought in to aid allies in the Gulf War of 1991. This Foxbat plane is a single-seater, meaning it's equipped for one pilot only. It's also powered by 2 Tumansky R-15B 300 turbojet engines that each deliver over 16,000 pounds of thrust to the plane. When flying at higher altitudes, the plane can reach Mach 3.2 and even go as fast as 740 miles per hour when flying lower. There was also a built-in infrared system that allowed the Foxbat to shoot homing missiles at its target with ease. The Foxbat plane was so impressive that the model used during Operation Iraqi Freedom is currently being restored so it can be put on display in the National Museum of USAF, the United States Air Force, in Dayton, Ohio. It will be right next to the XB-70 Valkyrie, which you may recognize as plane number 6 in today's video. So tell us, would you ride in a plane this fast? Let us know in the comments section down below. Also, be sure to subscribe. In the meantime, let's move on to number 3 on our list. Number 3. Lockheed YF12 Mach 3.2, 2,275 miles per hour. This next plane was nicknamed the Blackbird and is yet again another super-fast aircraft devised by the United States military. It first took flight on March 1st of 1965 and went on to set a record for how fast it flew. The Lockheed YF12 flew over 2,000 miles per hour at an altitude of over 80,000 feet. Over the course of the next few years, the Air Force would team up with NASA as they continue to test out these super powerful aircrafts. However, not all test flights were successful. One of the Lockheed YF-12 aircrafts had suffered an in-flight fire and crashed. This made NASA do more research into why aircraft suffer from high heat levels during flight. They found that when a plane is flying as fast as the Lockheed Y12 was flying, there begins to be a lot of friction between the plane and the air, thus potentially causing an in-flight fire. All this research is thanks to the Lockheed YF-12. Not only did this plane help NASA with their research, but it's just in general an incredible technological feat. It weighs over 127 pounds and is powered by 2 engines, specifically Pratt & Whitney J58s, each powered by 32,000 pounds of torque. Although these engines are super important, the Lockheed YF-12 also gained extra power from a supersonic shockwave captured within the engine. All in all, it's another success from NASA and the Air Force. Number 2. SR71 Blackbird Mach 3.4, 2,500 miles per hour plus. Number 3 on today's list isn't the only aircraft to wear the Blackbird title with pride. The SR71 model of the Blackbird was designed by the same company, Lockheed, for usage within the United States Air Force. The futuristic exterior may look like this plane was taken straight from a sci-fi film, but we assure you, the SR-17 model is very real. Not only is it real, it's the world's fastest jet-propelled aircraft. It's so powerful that an actual working model of the plane is on display in the National Air and Space Museum. That specific model was actually flown from Los Angeles to Washington, D.C. in a little over a single hour. Mind you, that distance when flown by a commercial aircraft takes up to 5 hours to complete. This SR-71 made that trip in just a fifth of the time. What inspired them to create such a high-speed plane? Well, we'll give you a hint. It's a historical event that inspired number 4 on today's list. If you said the Cold War, that would be correct. When tensions between Eastern Europe and the West were rising, the Air Force scrambled to up their game, and if the Blackbird is any indication of their efforts, then we can safely say that they achieved their goal. They needed a high-speed plane that could do reconnaissance work over the Soviet Union without risk of being shot down by an enemy missile, and thus the Blackbird was born. This model plane has been used by the US government for years. However, as space surveillance technology began to grow, the need for these types of planes went down a tremendous amount. They finally ceased production of the Blackbird planes in 1990. Although they may no longer be in use by the Air Force, we can still marvel at the amazing legacy this plane has created. It's truly one of a kind. Number 1. NASA USAF X-15 Mach 6.72, 4,520 miles per hour. Making the top spot on today's list is this absolute wonder of aviation technology, the X-15. Did you know that this was the very first ever manned flight to fly to the edges of space? It's also the world's very first plane to reach supersonic speeds. If you thought tripling the speed of sound was impressive, wait until you hear how fast this plane can go. The X-15 can reach speeds of higher than 5 times the speed of sound. Why was it built to go so fast? Well, this plane was actually used to help scientists in the 1960s study ways to improve space travel. In fact, if you fly this model plane over an altitude of 50 miles, you earned yourself a pair of astronaut wings from NASA. Only 3 X-15s were ever built, totaling just under 200 flights between all three combined. You may be familiar with one of the first pilots of an X-15. His name was Neil Armstrong. Ring a bell? Well, if it does, that's because Neil Armstrong was actually the first person to walk on the moon. That just goes to show how close to space travel this model of plane truly was. The X-15 currently lives in a museum so that people from all over the world can marvel at the amazing work and research that went into making this aircraft a reality. Which one of the planes that we talked about today were your favorite? Be sure to share your answers in the comments. We cannot wait to see which one you all pick. And that's it for today's video. If you liked it, be sure to leave a like and of course subscribe for more amazing content like this. We'll see you in the next video. Thanks for watching.